Hey, we're in the shop today with Woodworking with Wes. I just wanted to talk about some of the stuff that I use in the shop, and today I thought I'd talk about saw blades. We have lots of different kinds of saw blades to use for different applications, and I just kind of wanted to go over some of them and what we use them for, because they all have a specific use, and if you use the wrong saw blade when you're cutting the wrong thing, you don't get as good a cut. So let's talk about what we use on our saw. First thing we're going to talk about is some of the things that we need to know about saw blades. First off, this is a 12-inch saw blade. This is a 10-inch saw blade. My 12-inch saw blade comes on a chop saw that I have that's a 12-inch saw blade. This is the blade that came when I purchased the saw. It's a very low quality saw blade. It's kind of thin. The teeth are not very close together, and it's mainly just a sales blade. But I keep it around just to show you that this would be a saw blade that I would use if I was cutting something that I wasn't very interested in having a good sharp cut, or I was just chopping something up. This would be the blade that I would use. As you can see, I've never used it before because most of the time I'm cutting better stuff than that. But let's move on to the different blades I would use. This now, for some words of explanation, these are teeth on a saw blade. 5/8 arbor is typical for a table saw. Most saw blades are 5/8 arbors and 10-inch saw blades. And these little chunks on the end are carbide teeth. And carbide, the reason that saw blades are tipped with carbide is it makes a smoother cut, it lasts longer, and stays sharper longer, and it just is a better all-around cutting material than the steel that is the blade that the blade is made out of. The carbide tips are much better, and so you'll find all of the blades that I use in the shop are all carbide tipped. Now, this is a 50-tooth, what they call combination blade. Some of the teeth are close together, and then there's some large spaces. That's where the combination comes in. This is just for general purpose cutting or ripping. Now, if I was going to rip a board, this is a blade that I could use for both ripping and doing some of the finer work because it's a combination blade. I use this blade for when I'm roughing out my material. 10-inch on my saw blade. This is a 60-tooth blade, so 10 more teeth than the other one. These are equally spaced, and this is for ripping softer woods. If I was ripping hardwood, and I don't have a rip blade because I don't rip hardwoods very often with anything other than my combination, but this is a blade that would, and ripping is when you cut lineal with the grain. You cut along the grain straight. Cross cut is when you cross cut the grain, cut across the grain. This would be a saw blade that I would use for lineal cuts, and it is got carbide teeth and close enough together that I would get a nice cut. But if I wanted more finished cut, I could even go closer teeth, and we'll go there in just a second. But this is a saw blade that I would use for most of my hardwoods in cutting out my hardwoods. This and my combination blade. Now, when it comes to cutting sheet goods, and here's just a piece of melamine that I had here for a support, but this is a blade that we use in cutting our sheet goods. Now, I'm going to stand it up on end here, and I'm going to have my video kind of aimed down the top of the blade. And if you'll look, each tooth is alternated on an angle. That's called a triple chip or a melamine blade. And what it does is it makes a smoother cut on the melamine. This is one that has a little bit smaller teeth. Here is another one that is also an 80-tooth blade that has a little bit bigger teeth, but it's the same kind of thing, same number of teeth, nice big carbide edges, and this one also has the triple chip on the top. One of the things about having a really good carbide blade when you're cutting your melamine is it doesn't tear out. It makes a nice smooth cut on your melamine, and it makes a great finish cut for your cabinets as you're putting it together. This is the blade that I use exclusively when I'm cutting out my boxes and getting my panels and things like that ready to go. I use an 80-tooth blade. Now, they have a finer blade even yet, a 120-tooth blade. I don't have one right here with me. I have one, but I have it at on my saw out on my job site. It's a 12-inch blade, goes on my chop saw, and it's for cutting moldings and crowns and things like that on my chop saw to give me a very fine finish cut for my installations. So remember, as you're going and shopping for saw blades, think about what you're doing. Think about the fact that when you're out on the job or you're in the shop, there are specific uses and specific things that blades are made for. Ripping, cross-cutting, finish cutting, sheet goods, or out on the job site or even in the shop when you're making fine molding cuts and things like that. Remember, think about what you're cutting and buy the blade or get the blade that is specifically designed for that. Your product will turn out much better, your job will be nicer when it's all done, and you'll end up with a better finished product every time. Just a little something to learn from woodworking with Wes.